In this video, I'm going to explain why the brain gets bored and what can we do about it. We all have this problem. It's so easy to get bored, and when we are bored, we're not motivated to do anything. And sometimes it's things that we can get bored with, things that we do enjoy. So what's going on in our brain? Because if we can understand what's going on in the brain, then we can understand maybe what we can do about it. So first, let's talk about why do we get bored? Well, typically when we get bored, it's because we are doing repetitive, monotonous things over and over and over again that just isn't stimulating for our brain. When things aren't stimulating the brain does get bored. And when we do things that are very repetitive, such as like doing homework that maybe isn't that exciting, or doing chores that have repetitive things that are doing the same thing over and over again, for example, like picking weeds. Yeah, that was something I hated doing growing up. Still don't enjoy doing it because to me it seems very repetitive of doing the same thing over and over again. But I enjoyed mowing the lawns because usually there's different avenues. I made a game out of it. I was thinking I was on a go-kart. You know, there were certain things that I did that made it exciting. But you got to understand, okay, if there's certain things that you're being bored of doing, it's probably because it's too repetitive, it's monotonous, not exciting. So what can we do to make it exciting? Well, it's like I said before. Sometimes you got to make a game out of it if it's something you have to do, or you pair it with something that you do enjoy doing, such as listening to something while you do that repetitive thing. So you're thinking about something else to keep your brain stimulated on something that is exciting. The second reason of why our brain gets bored is it has a lot to do with our attention span. Over the years, our attention span has diminished. And especially for people with ADHD, our attention span, like myself included, that has ADHD, our attention span is very limited. And therefore, repetitive things can be very monotonous for us and just becomes boring. But, you know, the term being bored or just bored really didn't come out until the 1850s. Because before that, before the revolutionary era, is that we were hunters and gatherers. We still had to go and search for food. We still had to hunt for it or work for it. And it took all day, where now we live in this era where everything's just at our fingertips. So it's easier to get bored. And that's where that term came along. So if we understand that, and how we have adapted over the years and now the modern era of where everything is accessible. So our attention span becomes limited. Now, why does it become limited? Well, because our brain is so used to so many stimulating things all at once. And this is where it's something to probably think about a dopamine detox. What does that mean? Well, dopamine detox, because our dopamine is the reward system. It motivates us. And when we've been exposed to things that are rewarding, playing video games, you know, that's fine. But if we're playing video games all day, we find other things not as stimulating, or we binge watch our favorite TV shows all day long throughout the entire week. Everything else isn't become as stimulating. So if we are having these addictive habits, or even porn, for example, same thing. You're going to find things are not as stimulating that used to be. For example, maybe exercising isn't stimulating to you because you have been binge watching your favorite Netflix shows. You have been playing video games all day long, or watching porn all day long. Those are very high stimulating things that eventually things that were stimulating to you are not going to be stimulating. So what you need to do is really cut back your high stimulating things. By doing this, this helps reignite the dopamine in a healthy, balanced way so our brain does not get bored. Now, leading into that, the third thing is really understanding the brain chemistry and what's going on in our brain chemistry. So like I said before, it has to do a lot with the stimulances that we are fed every day, especially this evil device sometimes. You know, I have one. It has a very good use of information. It's a great tool, but being on Facebook, social media, a lot of different kind of sources that we're always constantly stimulating, looking for the next thing, someone to actually grab our attention. And we live in this era where that becomes a problem. And when that becomes a problem, the dopamine levels can be depleted. And when that's depleted, sometimes even our serotonin can be depleted. And serotonin has a lot to do with balancing our mood and regulating our stress. And if we are in constant high stimulation, eventually we reach burnout of being excited for really anything. And so it's important to wean ourselves off. But things that you can do that help with having more an exciting experience is go out in nature. Go experience things that are actually outside of your house. Be able to have those experiences that reconnect you to the world that we live in. If we don't reconnect ourselves and don't get away from the things that are always constantly stimulating us, you're going to feel bored all the time. Now, being in a bored state isn't always a bad thing. In fact, actually being bored gives us the opportunity to doodle, to be creative. In fact, this is where a lot of famous people have found that being in a bored state, a bored mind, is where most of their creative ideas came. I know for me, when I have gotten most of my things done, and it's towards the end of the day, and I don't know what to do, I kind of tend to be bored, I might doodle, inspiration comes. And sometimes, people, we look at boredom as a bad thing, but it necessarily is not a bad thing because it can create things as far as new original ideas. It helps us to be more creative. It also is a way to reignite new things because we can't be always stimulated 24/7. We just can't. If we're stimulated 24/7, we are going to reach burnout. And so boredom is a nice balanced state to be in. The problem is if you're in a boredom state for long periods of time. And this goes back to the brain chemistry. So when we have low serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine levels, that could put us in a very bored state, can cause severe depression, suicidal, definitely ADHD runs in this category. But when we're in a long bored state, it could be a possibility that you're depressed, severely depressed, something that you should be checking with your doctor if this is in a case. If you're very unmotivated and you've been in this state for weeks, months, as chances are there could be depression sinking in. And it's important to do something about this as far as implementing these things. If you're wondering, how do I stimulate my brain? If I'm always bored, how do I stimulate it? Well, if you want to check out this playlist right here, I go over the natural way to actually stimulate your brain to be able to be more focused, to be more productive. These are the natural ways to be able to implement that, the different supplements, the different types of natural ways of approaching it. So go ahead and join me right here in these videos and I'll explain how to do that.